It takes years and years of training to learn to think like a psychologist. They are taught to think differently, they are taught to see differently. They have to understand all that the field of psychology has learned from centuries of exploration. And it all starts with understanding the central tenets of psychology. One of these central tenets is that honest speech treats confusion. If you're confused about something and you write about it, if you speak about it, even if you talk about it with yourself, it will start making more sense to you. That is because confusing questions are not to be dealt with in your mind. They need to be dealt with either by talking to someone else or by writing on paper, because then your thoughts will stop being as muddled as they would be otherwise. Questions like what is the meaning of life, or questions like what you want to do with your life, are not to be answered in your mind. That is why they're confusing in the first place. They are to be answered either through talking to someone else or talking to yourself, or writing, which is essentially the same thing as talking to yourself. Even during therapy, the therapist is not supposed to tell people what is wrong with them, but to help them in their journey of self discovery. That is the difference between therapeutic listening and ordinary listening. Therapists don't just look at what the client is saying, they look at it as a symptom of what they did not say, of what is going on underneath. That is how you begin to understand the unconscious. They're not supposed to be trying to make conversation like you would in a normal situation. They are not paying attention to their previous experiences, and they're not concerned with what replies they are going to give to what the client is saying. They need to focus on being an internal guide, on helping the client in understanding the problem that they are dealing with. Something that can be very insightful in such cases is a general understanding of personality traits. If you know what traits are most dominant in the person that you are looking at, then you know what their strengths or weaknesses are likely to be. You can remember the 5 traits psychologists usually use through the acronym OCEAN. O stands for openness. This trait is associated with being open-minded, being imaginative, or being original. Creative people tend to have a high amount of this trait. The second trait is conscientiousness. People high in this trait tend to be reliable, detail-oriented, responsible, and disciplined. They tend to be very goal-directed. The next one is extroversion. This is associated with being outgoing, with being social and liking social interaction. The A stands for agreeableness, which is associated with being caring or compassionate or empathetic. The N stands for neuroticism. This has to do with how anxious you are, how easily you can be put into a negative emotional state, and this has to do with emotional stability as well. The point of this is not only to understand your personality, but also to make it malleable to some extent. If you're high in introversion, then you're less likely to like social interaction. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have good social skills. You should still challenge yourself to engage in social interaction every once in a while, even though you don't want to. Little by little, you can train yourself to also have the traits of the opposite personality type, so that you can channel your traits in different situations. And that is the point of having personality, that you have one specific type of personality, but you can also channel the traits of the opposite type. You are way more complex than you see yourself to be. And to learn psychology is to recognize that complexity and to learn to deal with it. A part of that is learning to deal with your motivation. Your motivation has to do with your why. Why are you doing something in the first place? If you have no motivation to do one specific task, then usually it means that doing that task is not worth it for you. All behavior is goal directed. Whatever you do it because you have something to achieve from it. If you don't want to do something, then maybe what you have to achieve from it is not worth it. That is something that I don't think we talk about very often. If you write about why you want to do something in the first place, what you have to gain from it, then maybe you will find that it is actually worth it for you to do that. If there is only one task that you do not want to do, then maybe there is something that is wrong with the task rather than is wrong with you. Understanding things like this is how you systematically come to solve the problems that you encounter again and again. This is how psychologists help their clients systematically deal with their problems. If there's a problem that you have that keeps recurring, that keeps coming back, then you need to find some sort of a system that will make it so that you can deal with it once and for all, so that it does not come back to you again and again. One interesting thing about motivation that I have found out from this is that if I write down what I am trying to achieve and why I am trying to achieve it, then it becomes way more likely that I will achieve it in the end. That I will want to keep pursuing it even when all of the odds are against me. Next, you also need to mind your training. Whatever reward you give yourself, make your behavior more likely. Your punishments make your behavior less likely. Are you rewarding the right things? Are you punishing the right things? Are you rewarding your social media use, meaning that it will happen even more? Are you punishing your studying habits by making yourself study for too long and not rewarding yourself afterward? Another very interesting thing about psychology is that the stories that most call to us, the stories that most interest us, tell us something about life that we know but cannot put into words. The hero's journey, for example, is a structure of story that is used across stories, across movies, across mythology, everywhere. And the fact that it calls to us says something to us about our psychology. You can understand any story if you just use the framework of the hero's journey. There is a protagonist, they're trying to achieve some sort of a goal, but they cannot get themselves to do it. Finally, they leave their comfort zone, they venture out into chaos, and finally they figure it out. They win, and that is where the story ends. That is the meta story that most calls to us, and there is reasons for that. And if you understand this, it will change how you watch movies, it will change how you understand stories as a whole. It is one of the very profound things about understanding depth psychology, understanding mythology. Anyway, that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and please watch this video next. Bye bye.